over the world, the Jewish history within regards to the rabbinic history. And today we're going to touch on the country Mexico over here today. Last night we recorded also on another country. We completed the series on Turkey yesterday, and very, very interesting. It's making fantastic progress. We actually spoke about Cyprus last night. So today we're going to speak about history of the Jewish community of Mexico. Now, the history of the Jews in Mexico, I think, begins in the year 1519. With the arrival of the conversos. This was obviously also known as the Moranos, the crypto-Jews that were forcibly converted to Catholicism, and obviously at the time period of the Spanish Inquisition. During the period, the Viceroyalty of New Spain, this was I think between the years 1521 to obviously all the way to 1821, was a number of Jews came to Mexico, especially during the period of the Iberian Union. I believe that was between the years 1580 to 1640, when obviously Spain and Portugal were ruled at that point in time by the same monarch. Political circumstances allowed, let's say, freer movement by Portuguese crypto-Jews merchants into Spanish America. When the Portuguese regained their independence from Spain in 1640, Portuguese merchants in New Spain were prosecuted, let's just say, at that point in time by the Mexican Inquisition. There was a monopoly on the Roman Catholic Church in Mexico, which, let's say, would replace the religious toleration during the 19th century. And the Jews could openly immigrate to Mexico. They came from Europe and later from crumbling Ottoman Empire, including Syria, until the first half of the 20th century. Now, obviously, today, most of the Jews of Mexico are descendants of this immigration, and let's say divided up incredibly, let's just say, by Judeo-Spanish, you could say, many Sephardim and Ashkenazim also. And let's say it's an insular community with its own religious, social and cultural institutions in itself. Mostly the vast majority is situated in Mexico City, in Monterrey, and also in Guadalajara, respectively, over here. So very, very interesting. So we can explore the history here within regards to the Mexican Jewish community. So welcome everyone to the channel. If you are tuning in live, I'm just going to have a coffee and say the blessing over here. And so we explore the history of the country Mexico. Now, first of all, let's speak about the Viceroyalty of Spain. Now, Jews and Moranos, conversos, were part of the conquest and colonization in Mexico. Participations, let's say, of the transatlantic and the trans-Pacific trade networks. There was development of domestic trade. Now, conversos accompanied someone named Hernan Corte. So who was he? This was in the year 1519. These were members of Jewish families which had been forcibly converted to Christianity to avoid expulsion from Spain after reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula from the Moors. I think the reconquest was followed by the Spanish Inquisition, and which made, let's say, conversos one of their targets, let's say, with accusations of reverting to Judaic practice at that point in time. And during this time, there were two types of conversos: crypto-Jews and Jews who fully converted to Catholicism. The Jews who converted were used to report at that point in time to crypto-Jews, to the Catholic Church, and consequently they were awarded with high power positions within the Catholic Church. Furthermore, obviously that's very, very sad. We don't want anyone to convert, God forbid. Now, furthermore, during this time the Catholic Church was in charge of the social welfare, and of most of the violence from the conquest of the Aztec Empire had subsided, and the Spanish Inquisition would continue for various decades. I think several decades actually. The families were able to live at that point in time peacefully, integrating into Mexico's elite, and with some becoming prominent, let's say, Catholic early, and some would return, thank God, to Jewish practice at that point in time. Someone named David Nathan, who we'll speak about in a minute, proposed that the first coins minted in the Western Hemisphere by the Spanish conquisitions in Mexico feature a Hebrew letter Aleph, suggesting evidence of a Jewish presence or influence in Mexico in the year 1536. He notes that nearly all of the dyes prepared under tenure of the first Asaya used the perpetuated Aleph symbol in place of the Christian cross potent mark, let's just say, found almost universally, or medieval Spanish and Mexican coinage. Now, this Mr. Nathan goes on to consider possible Jewish family connections to the known early Mexican mint workers. So that's a very interesting tidbit to hear about with regards to it. So they actually say, I think the persecution of Jews came to New Spain along with the conquistadors. I think there was someone named Bernal Diaz de Castillo. He described in his writings the various executions of soldiers during the conquest of Mexico because they were accused of being practicing Jews. You can see the anti-Semitism that took place out there, including someone named Hernando Alonso. He built the boats of Cortes used to assault the Tenochtitlan. However, the Mexican Inquisition was not fully established until 1571, when I think it became a threat to converso and Jewish communities, with an initial purge of them. I think from 1585 till 1601, those were the years. In 1606, I believe at that stage in time, Mexico received an order by the King of Spain to free conversos in Inquisition prisons. Let's say this relaxing of the Inquisition in Mexico, which was never as severe as in Spain, allowed, let's say at that point in time, more to come over in the first half of the 17th century. New conversos settled in Mexico City, Acapulco, Veracruz, and in Campeche, as they, at that point in time, provided the most opportunities for mercantile activity. Some did move to the more outlying areas, such as the Zacatecas, but they still afforded more opportunities than places farther north. There was a second Inquisition persecution of the conversos from the year 1642 to 1649, and the focus shifted to matters such as blasphemy and moral infractions. Now, but during the entire colonial period, practicing Jews in Spain or elsewhere, let's say at that point in time, could not enter Spanish colonial territory over there. Anyone tuning in live, welcome to our channel. We are exploring the history of the Jewish community of Mexico over here on this special series over here as we continue the series. Who's David Nathan? So he seemed like he's a researcher who's giving over this information. He was actually born in 1968. He's an American psychiatrist, a writer, a founder and past and present of the Doctors for Cannabis Regulation, best known, I think, for advocacy of cannabis legalization, publishing research, let's say, on archaeology. He's a historian on history on animation, numismatics, early American football, respectively. So it seems like that's who he is, David Nathan, who's commented on this seemingly over here. Okay, now one notable episode during the colonial period was the establishment of the new kingdom of Leon. What was that? This was, I believe, in 1567. The Carvajal family arrived to New Spain under nobleman Louis de Carvajal. With the exception of him and their cousin, the family was crypto-Jewish. In the year 1579, Carvajal was granted land in what is the northeastern Mexico, just north of what was considered New Spain. The area welcomed both conversos and practicing Jews, with about 75% of initial settlers being secretly Jewish. Some theories state that, I believe, the Monterrey developed as a commercial center despite its colonial era remoteness because of crypto-Jews influence. However, Louis de Carvajal and members of his family were persecuted in 1589 for practicing Judaism. The Carvajal nephew, someone named Louis de Carvajal the Younger, kept members detailing the life and persecution. These are now considered to the earliest writings by a Jew in the Americas. The Auto de Fe of Marina Carvajal has become, let's say, part of Mexican art and literature. By the year 1641, the colony had grown, and some of the settlers would later move to establish new settlements in the Coahuila, Texas, and in New Santada, respectively, over here. Very interesting enough. Now, so we can see we're talking all about the Mexican Inquisition over here. And I believe the largest number of persecutions by the Mexican Inquisition occurred in the wake of 1640, the dissolution of the Iberian Union, when Spain and Portugal had been ruled by the same monarch. Portuguese merchants were more easily, let's say, entered Spanish America at that point in time, and a complex community of crypto-Jews connected to transatlantic and trans-Pacific trade networks emerged. Evidence from individual cases, let's say, prosecuted by the Mexican Inquisition indicates that most crypto Jews in Mexico, where their parents had been born in Portugal, primarily from Portuguese capital of Lisbon or from the Castelo Branco, and there were very few wealthy Portuguese merchants who were leaders of the community, but most were shopkeepers and craftsmen. A prominent merchant, I think, was Simon Veyes, whom the Inquisition accused of letting his house serve as a synagogue in the 17th century until 1642. Persecutions began. He had risen from the humble circumstances, but he and other wealthy merchants came to socialize, let's say, with officials at that point in time and play a prominent role among, let's say, the elite people in Mexico. Their wealth was based on licenses. I think at that point in time there was a slave trade over there in Mexico, since Portugal controlled the African coast, where they, let's say, were sourced at that point in time. Portuguese merchants held contacts with tax farming and supplying the Spanish fleet and fortress stores and munitions, respectively. Okay, let's talk about post-independence immigration. Anyone joining into the channel at the moment, please subscribe. We're exploring the history of the Mexican Jewish community over here, so please join our channel now and welcome. Now, post-independence immigration, let's talk about that. Mexico would finally gain independence. It abolished, let's say, the Inquisition, but the Catholic religion was declared official. Remaining crypto Jews did not openly admit to such, but began to observe various different Jewish rituals. I think between the years 1825 to 1860, few European Jews from Germany and Eastern Europe arrived. The immigrants were not allowed to become Mexican citizens, but their main challenges to living in Mexico were economic, rather than, let's say, social or religious. In 1861, a group rented a hall to celebrate Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and the first recorded instance of public Jewish worship. In, I think, 1865, Emperor Maximilian I issued at that point in time an edict of religious tolerance, with representatives from the Jewish Organization in Europe and from the United States of America coming to Mexico, exploring choices for immigration. From 1864 to 67, Maximilian invited some European Jews from France, Belgium, Austria, Hungary to settle in Mexico. By 1867, only 20 Jewish families were living in Mexico, with about a dozen more elsewhere. Now, during the Reform War, the liberals under Benito Juarez reinforced freedom of religion, allowing Jews who arrived after that time to Mexico citizenship and full integration at that point in time. In the 1880s, a significant wave of Jewish immigration came as the Mexican government invited a number of Jewish bankers to operate in the country. And I think there was assassination of the Tsar Alexander II in Russia pushed Jews to leave the country. The Jews settled both in Mexico City and various other areas in the country, including rural areas, often as traveling salesmen. About half of Mexico's Jewish population, I think, could be linked to this wave of immigration. Another group of Jews that came at this time were industrialists from France. Many French arrivals were not interested in staying permanently and went back, let's say, to their fortunes in Mexico. However, a few married and stayed, leaving, let's say, behind in Mexico, let's say, last names such as Herzog, Scherer, and Levy, respectively, over there. Now, it's interesting. The Jewish immigrants, I believe, in Mexico City eventually would build businesses such as Haberdashery at the Madero Street, that was a center of European fashion, and La Esmeralda jewelry store, now known as Museo del Estanquilo, with a reputation similar to Tiffany's, let's just say, that specific store on the corner of Isabel La Catolica and Madero. Now, I believe the Jewish owner of El Salon Rojo was one of the capital's first movie houses, let's say, which developed the country's first Jewish cemetery, reported over. Very, very interesting enough. I think, just to continue over here, it was during the late 19th and earliest 20th century, Sephardic and Middle Eastern Jews began arriving from, obviously, what's now Syria and the rest of the crumbling Ottoman Empire, forming the Magen David and the Monte Sinai communities in Mexico. These were still coming from Eastern Europe with, let's say, poorer, usually people were shoemakers, furrowers, peddlers and tailors, which first lived in cities such as Puebla, Veracruz, and Chiapas. before they would migrate to Mexico City. And I think for the Sephardic Jews, similar language and culture will make it much easier for them to adapt, obviously, over there. So that's very, very interesting. So now, I think it was around the year, right at the start of the 20th century, 1900, the Mexican census counted 134 Jews in the country, very small. In 1950, there was really 7,300 Jewish people that will be in Mexico, and they will emigrate from Eastern Europe, 2,640 from Spain or other Ottoman Empire areas, and 1,620 from Cuba and the United States. And these various Jewish groups would form their own religious congregations and social institutions. Turkish Jews began holding open religious services in 1901. They founded the first Talmud Torah in 1905 as an educational institution for boys. Ashkenazic Jews began holding open services in 1904. And the first formal Jewish organization in Mexico, the Monte Sinai community, was founded in the year 1912. Very interesting. Now, anyone that's joining the channel at the moment, please subscribe at the moment and join our community. We've got fantastic content over here. We're exploring the history of the country Mexico. Now, during the Mexican Revolution, many foreigners, including Jewish people, left the country, but immediately after began to arrive in substantial numbers again. Between 1917 to 1920, they came from Russia, Poland, Lithuania, and the Balkans and the Middle East. The rate increased in 1921, when the United States imposed quotas on its immigration, and 10,000 arrived from Eastern Europe to the port of Veracruz at the invitation of the President, Plutarch Elias Calais, I think at that point in time. Jewish organizations such as the Committee de Damas and North American B'nai B'rith were formed to help, let's say, the new arrivals adapt. In the 1920s, the Jewish community grew and prospered in Mexico. The immigration rate slowed, I think, after 1929. There was a Great Depression, and new immigration policies which favored those were with a more similar ethnic and religious background to that of Mexico, respectively, at that point in time. Now, most of the Jewish community's social and religious organizations were formally founded in the first half of the 20th century at that point in time. And these would actually include Sociedad Beneficiaria Alianza Monte Sinai in 1912, the Young Men's Hebrew Association in Mexico City, 1917, the first Ktav, or Jewish religious school, was in 1917, the first federally recognized synagogue under the terms of the Constitution of 1917, the Talmud Torah Hatiyah in 1919, the Congregation Niche Israel for Ashkenazi Jews in 1922, the first Zionist organization in 1922, the first, I believe, Ashkenazic religious school in 1922, the Association Cultural Il Perez Ferin, later called the Idsha Kulta Gewerkschaft in 1922, the Har Sinai Synagogue for Damascus Jewish community, and 1923, the first Keren Hayeson, or Campaign for the National Fund for Palestine in 1923, the Central Israelites, the first synagogue in Monterrey in 1923, the Colegio Israelite de Mexico in 1924, the Agudat Ajim community in Guadalajara, I think that was in the year 1923, the B'nai Kedem Sephardic Community Center in 1926, the Nija Israeli Ashkenazi Cemetery in 1929, Camara Israelita de Industria, Y Camerica in Mexico, and Union de Literatos Aristas Judias in 1931. We're just going through a list of the different organizations that we started. The Federation de Sociedad Israelita de Mexico in 1932, the Colegio Israelita Hatikva in Monterrey in 1932 would be at that point in time, B'nai B'rith in 1934, the Sociedad de Beneficia de Umbra for the Aleppo Jewish community. I'm just going to take a short break. Yes, sorry about that. Just took a short break over there. So just listing some of the synagogues and different organizations that will start up in Mexico in the early 1900s. I think also another one was the Federation de Sociedad Israelita de Mexico in 1930, the Colegio Israelita Hatikva in Monterrey, B'nai B'rith 1934, the Sociedad de Beneficios Dadad Umarpe for the Aleppo Jewish community. Today, I think it's known as the Magen David Comunidad. That was in 1938. The Zionistic Convention, 1938. In addition, I think newspapers and other periodicals were established in various languages, such as a Mexinesha Yiddish Leben in Yiddish in 1927, in Der Weg, a Yiddish and Spanish section in 1929, Die Stimme was Yiddish in 1935, La Verdad was in Spanish in 1936, and the first printing press for the Hebrew alphabet was brought in Mexico in the year 1930. The Jewish population, come what 1930, was a staggering 21,000 people. From then on, in 1940s, the Jews arrived, who were fleeing the Nazis, and this immigration was not as large as in previous decades, as most of those who arrived were those who had already family and friends inside the country at that stage in time. Okay. Now, despite its strong, let's say, the country itself has a Catholic identity and history of Inquisition, there's been little intolerance or resistance to Jewish immigration into Mexico. We have to point that over. Well, let's just say, the Catholic Church had not welcomed the Jewish immigration in the 19th century. It was still struggling against the government restrictions and saw growing Protestantism as a greater threat than of the Jewish community, they felt. Over the 20th century, the Mexican Catholic Church lost its opposition to Jewish presence. The only recorded instance of significant anti-Semitism came in the 1930s due to the economic depression. Mexican labor unions pressured the government to restrict Chinese and Jewish immigration. In May 1931, 250 Jewish immigrants were expelled from the La Laguna market in Mexico City. In the late 1930s, some anti-Jewish demonstrations erupted, mostly by terrible Nazi supporters financed by Berlin. And in 1937, an immigrant quota system was initiated, which restricted immigration from certain countries such as Poland to 100 people per year. Let's just say shutting out many Jewish would-be immigrants. However, at the same time, the Mexican government allowed, though, for more immigration of refugees. For example, 200 Jews, I think, come from Cuba in this country under the government Lázaro Cárdenas. I don't know if it was legally or not itself. Anyone tuning in live, we're exploring the Jewish community history of Mexico over here. So please, friends, subscribe to the channel now and join our community over here as we are exploring the history of Mexico over here. We're nearing 8,000 subscribers, so please join the channel now. Let's talk about the 20th century and integration more in the latter part. Now, Jewish religious and social institutions, let's say at that point in time, coalesced and grew in the mid-20th century. With the Central Cultural Israelite in 1941, the Committee Central Israelite. I've got a bit of your dogs.
Sorry. Oh my God.
History? Yeah, I'm doing a history video on the history of Mexico as we speak.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I can give you the live channel at the moment. I don't know, you want to subscribe afterwards? Yeah. It's we're just you live here or? Yeah. So it's just going on online at the moment. Okay, friends, we're going to continue now. We are talking about the 20th century over here. Just half a minute break that was. Now, other institutions will actually form in the mid-1900s, including Central Cultural Mexico-Israel in 1947, the Colegio Israelite de Guajuela in 1950, the Bet Israel Community Center for English speakers in 1957, and the Nij Israel Temple in Acapulco Street in Mexico City in 1965. I think come with the year 1987, the Tribuna Israelite along the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico began a series of cultural presentations about Judaism, and more will actually go on. The Jewish presence in Mexico during the first half of the 20th century, which received the Kenyon Prize in 1993. It, let's say, depicts Mexican Jews as well integrated into Mexican society, but with more observance of religion in everyday life than any other of the Jews in diaspora. 1995, the Tribuna Israelite co-sponsored the Las Jornadas contra del Racismo, along with the Secretary De Educação Pública and other organizations. So very, very interesting. Let's talk a bit more about the modern era, 21st century. The National Institute of Anthropology and History has achieved important recoveries of colonial and crypto-Jewish heritage, including identification and restoration of the mikveh of the Juliante and the Gure, respectively, which would be dated back to late 16th century, respectively. This is the oldest mikveh in the Americas, and come 2017, the Mexican consulate in New York City recovered the Kabbalah manuscript, the oldest known work by Jewish author in Americas, after it was stolen in National Archives in 1932. Very, very interestingly enough over here. So, anyone tuning in live, please subscribe. We're exploring the history of the Mexican Jewish community over here. Now, there hasn't been like a new wave of Jewish immigration from the old world to Mexico in the 21st century. Instead, small numbers of Jews have arrived, part of larger general immigration from Latin America. In 2021, construction began in the Ciudad de la Torre, I think a planned community aimed at attracting ultra-Orthodox Jews from within Mexico, as well as immigration from Latin America. As of September 2019 deadline, there's been more than 33,000 Mexican applications for Spanish citizenship through a 2015 program aimed at descendants of the expulsion of Jews expelled by Spain, respectively, over there. In early 2021, the President of Mexico, Carlos Salinas de Gortari, obtained, I think at that point in time, Spanish citizenship through this program. Very interesting enough. So I think it's interesting. A woman named Claudia Scheinbaum in 2018 became the first Jewish person and first elected woman, I think, to be the head of the government of Mexico City. And very, very interesting. So I think she would actually apply to be the president in 2024, if I'm not mistaken. And she was elected president in 2024 of Mexico, becoming the first woman and the first person of Jewish heritage to hold this office. Very interesting enough. So very interesting. Let's explore now the Jewish communities in Mexico, friends, over here. Here on this live edition over here. Friends, anyone joining and tuning in, please subscribe to the channel now. We're nearing 8,000 subscribers, friends. So let's talk about the Jewish communities in Mexico. Mostly consists of descendant immigrants from 19th and 20th centuries, estimating, I think, nationwide totals estimated between 90 to 100,000. About 75% are in Mexico City. I'm not too sure if they're all halachically Jewish or not. I'll say that on the outset. One main source figure is a Committee Central Israelite Mexico City, but I think its contact is limited more to Orthodox and conservative congregations. No contact, let's just say, to Jews that may be affiliated with the Reform movement or those who consider themselves secular. So the Mexican government census lists religion categories. I think they actually confuse it, let's just say, in themselves. So we're not too sure the exact statistics. The Mexican Jewish community obviously has strong roots in Mexico, and there's few problems in its, let's just say, host country. Openly Jewish people serve in government positions and are found in top businesses in Mexico, intellectual and artistic communities. One US-born Jew, someone named Sidney Franklin, became a popular bullfighter in the early 1920s. There's clashes, I think, there's been between Jewish communities and other Mexico, but I think it's generally peaceful, let's just say, in of itself. That's something that we have to point out within the country itself. Over here, the that's we're talking about over here. I think the Jews in Mexico are less united than those in USA and Canada. Among those descended from immigrants, social divisions remain. Obviously, there's Jewish communities from Aleppo, Damascus, and the Balkans and Eastern Europe. They have their own different synagogues and other institutions, let's just say, in of itself. So, however, the main split is obviously reported over here using Wikipedia source. Ashkenazim from Russia, Poland, and Germany, and other parts of Europe from the Sephardim, mostly from Italy and other Ottoman empires. The Ashkenazim subdivide among political and ideological axes and tend to be more liberal and secular, let's just say, in of itself, the general population. They founded several newspapers and publications such as Mexicana, I think Yiddish Leben, and the Redicada Arbatara, I think Tzena, and the Unser Leben, and others to express these different views. Sephardim, let's just say, were more patriarchal, less well educated, and more religiously observant. those from Syria and are subdivided in the Halabis, or the Magen David from Aleppo, and the Shamis or Monte Sinai from Damascus, respectively. So there are divides also in the Sephardi community itself. So that's what we had to point out. Obviously, during the earlier part of the 20th century, Jewish immigrants started a large number of religious and social organizations that helped the community adapt to life and preserve heritage. I think on the Tacubo Street, if I'm not mistaken, the historic center of Mexico City, there's a building called the Palacio de Mamol. The site over there was originally part of a convent, but later was subdivided, and a French-style mansion built in the 19th century. After the First World War, it became an important Jewish community center, active for nearly 2 decades. At first, it worked to help renew, let's say, newly arrived Jews in Mexico, but was a social and educational, let's just say, community center. There are 10 main organizations today, which most of Mexican Jewry is affiliated. For example, the Bet Israel Community Center is an organization that caters to English-speaking community. I think that's more towards conservative Judaism branch. If I'm mistaken, there's a Jewish sports center. I think it's more pluralistic. This is community, sports, culture, social institution that's got a membership of 19,000 people. The Monterrey Community Center is the main organization for this northern city. The North Badger, California Community Center served as a journey Jewish community. I think the Ashkenazi community itself serves the descendants of those who immigrated from Eastern Europe. There's a Bet El community. Now that's a conservative organization once again. So you can see there's divides between conservative and orthodox in many of the organizations in itself. The Guadalajara Community Center, people that live in the city. Obviously the Magen David Community Center was formed by descendants of immigrants from Halab, from Aleppo in Syria. Magen David also have a synagogue and a school system, I believe, in New York, if I'm not mistaken. The Alonso Monte Sinai was formed by descendants from Damascus, Syria, and Sephardi community was formed descendants of immigrants from the Balkans. There are a number of women's organizations which mostly focus on humanitarian issues, both inside and outside the community. And many of the women will actually run the educational institutions respectively over there. Now, what are the Jewish neighborhoods in Mexico City, friends? There's many neighborhoods there, I think, including the Colonia, Hippodrome Condesa, the Polanco and Lemos de Chapultepec, Santa Fe, and the Huixquiluan State of Mexico. There's 16 Jewish schools. About a dozen of those are in Mexico City, which has over 24 synagogues. In the 1920s, a Jewish community in Mexico centered in a historic downtown northeast, Zucoto, around Jesus Maria Street, the equivalent of Delencia Street in New York, according to author, I think someone named Ilan Stavans. I think in 1930s, 1940s, Jewish residents moved to the streetcar suburbs of Roma and Condesa, where I think at that point in time, Yiddish was unofficial language of Parco, Mexico, the local park. This was, we're talking about nearly 90 years ago at that point in time. I think in this area, in modern day, there's a Jewish museum, archive, synagogue, kosher deli at Acapulco Street, and more Orthodox synagogues hidden inside House of Amsterdam Avenue, and another synagogue at the corner of Monte de Oca and Parral Streets in the 50s, 60s, 70s. Jews moved further west to Polanco, Lomos, Intramuros, and there. Now, crypto-Jewish resurgence has been, I think the Inquisition in Mexico succeeded in eliminating all practices of colonial-era Judaism in Mexico. Cultural vestiges remain in forms of syncretic religious rituals and blended cuisines in of itself. Now, friends, I'm just going to take a short break. We're going to explore the synagogues in Mexico, some of the famous rabbis also that came from there. So just hang on for a minute and wait. And please, friends, in the meantime, subscribe to the channel also while I take a break.
I live in Michigan.
Oh, wow. Teacher.
I teach in
All right, I know that. With the 6 super early. Yeah. My son's actually. Sorry, so the good rock. Seminary rabbis in there. Yeah, so go all over to Shivos across the country. You're making it. It's just another thing I do. A lot of videos of history of rabbis. It's all over Israel. That's it. Even with not black, Rabbi White. He teaches it. Right. Rabbi Simon also. Rabbi Simon is in the college. Yeah. I'm only there at night, so. Alright. You never brought your book? No, not the one from the There's not one. I think teachers in the morning also. I went there last season. 15 years. So back in the next few weeks. You taught somewhere else? So I told that I was from there. Rav Shapiro there. Yeah, I think so, yes. So what he was yes, they give a short service because he like vomiting quite concerns as well. So I can give you that channel now. Good to film with you also. You'll be around there now. My colleagues there, sorry, for a few weeks. Yeah, now film with you also. Film in Australia and YouTube, yeah. I'll just give my last one.
That was before I even realized it. Yeah. Yeah, look at my website. If you want different
Okay, friends, thanks everyone for waiting. We're going to continue this video. We're exploring the history of the Mexican Jewish community. So I just took a short break over here. Let's explore a few of the synagogues, the main famous synagogues in Mexico. And we'll just give a list of them and say a few words in regards to them. There's the Nejeh Yisrael synagogue, which is more of a historical synagogue in Mexico City. The Yehuda Halevi synagogue. There's the El Neguv synagogue also. It's also a Jewish community, let's just say, of Venita Prieta. There's the Agudat Ajim synagogue, the Adat Yisrael synagogue, the Monte Sinai synagogue, the Rodvei Tzedek, the Bet Moshe. There's a Shar Le Simja synagogue over there. There's a Bet Yosef synagogue, Hoel Yitzhak synagogue. Obviously, they're spelled different ways in Spanish. There's a Bet Yitzhak synagogue, the Or Joseph synagogue, the Habitat synagogue, Magen David synagogue, the Aram Tsova synagogue, the Mo Avram synagogue. There is also a synagogue called the Ma'or HaTorah and the Keter Torah. There's Birkat Shmuel synagogue. These are just some of them. Ramat Shalom, the Sharei Tzion, Bet El synagogue, Bet Israel Community Center, the Shul Yavne. Now, friends, over here, there's some of these synagogues which I'm talking about over here. I don't know, some of them might be also in the conservative or reform sphere over here. So I'm not too sure if they're all Orthodox. There's Shul Yavne, there's a Comunidad Hebreo de Gujalia, the Comunidad Israelite de Guadalajara, the Comunidad Julia de Cancun, the Jewish Cultural and Community Center. There's now various Chabad synagogues now also, including the Chabad of San Miguel, a Chabad of Cozumel, Mexico, Chabad of CDMX, there's a Chabad of Playa del Carmen, a Chabad of Isla Mujeres, Chabad of Guadalajara, there's a Chabad of Kunkan, a Chabad of Tijuna, and a Chabad of Los Cobos, I believe, also respectively over there. And let's see a little bit within regards to some of these synagogues. First of all, the Yehuda Halevi synagogue. What is that? That's a famous synagogue, and I think it was built in the year 1941, 1942. It was named after the famous Jewish philosopher, physician, poet from medieval Spain, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. In 1924, just a bit of a history within regards to the video, let's talk about. I think the Sephardic Jewish community of Mexico City in 1924 unified as an organization called the La Fraternidad, the Brotherhood. The Sephardim did not have a synagogue of their own, having to use other synagogues at that point in time and the Jewish community buildings. However, they still ran into space issues. The organization used a Protestant church, reported over for a while, just using Wikipedia as a source, before deciding in 1940 to have their own building. In 1941, the organization bought a plot of land in Cali, Monterrey, where the congregation remains today. Now, I believe the design of the building was chosen in a contest. The winning submission was by engineer Francisco Canavas and was inspired by the Sephardic synagogue in Vidin in Bulgaria. The construction finished in 1942, and the synagogue was consecrated in honor of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi at the suggestion of the La Fraternidad member Victor Babani, also respectively over there. That's something to point out. Another famous synagogue is the El Nigyur synagogue. What is that? It's known also as a Jewish community of Venta Priesta. It's a Jewish congregation and synagogue located on Venta Piras. I think the congregation comprises of people who were descended from Bnei Anusim, also known as the conversos, Jews who were either forcibly converted to Christianity during the Spanish Inquisition and later returned to Judaism. The congregation was established in the latter part of the 19th century, earlier 20th century respectively, completed in 1930. Now, it's a small congregation on which there were either Sephardi Jews, a family history coming from Spain or Mexico, descendants of the lost tribe of Israel. The synagogue was founded in 1930 by the Tellez brothers and today run by the Tellez family. For many years, Rabbi Samuel Esler was the educational organizer of the community until his retirement in 1999. It's said that the community was founded between the end of the 19th century and 1920 by the Maria Trinidad, widow of one of Tellez brothers. Now, Maria viewed herself as a descendant of the Anusim, if I'm not mistaken. And very, very interesting. So that's something we had to point out within regards to that. Then there was another synagogue was the historic synagogue Justa Sierra, which I think is obviously Orthodox Jewish congregation, cultural center now, historic center of Mexico. The building was completed in 1941. Serves both as a synagogue and cultural center for the Ashkenazi Jewish community over there. I think the Nietzsche Israeli synagogue is the third oldest synagogue in Mexico City, founded by Ashkenazi Jews. It was built for Orthodox immigrants from Poland, Russia, Lithuania in the La Merced neighborhood. And it was the second Ashkenazi synagogue in Mexico City. I think they closed, if I'm not mistaken, from the 1960s, and the synagogue was used for other purposes for over 30 years before extensively restored and reopened in 2009, a synagogue and a cultural center. And there's guided tours, I think, for the public and tourist activities. And the synagogue was granted the title of historic synagogue, I believe, and one of the oldest in Mexico City, respectively. So that's very interesting. Let's speak about some of the rabbis now of Mexico City. One of the famous rabbis is Rabbi Abraham Shalem, who was a very, very famous rabbi in Mexico City. He was heavily influenced, I believe, by the Lubavitcher Rebbe also. I think he was actually born and educated in Jerusalem, and he was a 14th generation rabbi. Interesting enough, his rabbi was Rabbi Ben-Zion Meir Chai Uziel, who was the chief rabbi of Israel, and he would be the rabbi in Peru also, and he would serve the Sephardic community in Seattle, Washington, and he was actually quite close to Chabad Chassid in Washington. I think someone named Rabbi Sholom Rivkin, who actually served the Ashkenazi community there. And I think he, at that point in time, he would actually have a connection with the Rebbe, I think in the 1960s, respectively. So that's very, very interesting. Let's talk about him in a bit more detail. Over here, there's actually a very good article in JewishIdeas.org website with regards to Rabbi Aram Shalem, I think written by Rabbi Mark Angel, if I'm not mistaken. He actually states over, he's talking about Shabbat Teshuvah in an article with regards to Shabbat Teshuvah and the impact that rabbis have in themselves. So he speaks about Rabbi Shalem, and he states that Rabbi Shalem was actually born in 1928 and studied among great rabbis in the Holy Land, as we mentioned before, under auspices of Chief Rabbi Ben-Zion Meir Chai Uziel. He was a devoted disciple of Rabbi Uziel. They both really believed in classic models of Sephardic religious worldwide view, characterized rabbis of Judeo-Spanish background. I think, interesting enough, in 1959, Rabbi Shalem became Rabbi of Congregation Ezra Beserot in Seattle, interesting enough. And I think Rabbi Angel himself, if I'm not mistaken, had a connection to the Ezra Beserot community. Interesting enough. So that's just a side point. And I believe at that point in time there was, so I believe, so he would, before he came to Seattle, he served as Sephardic community rabbi in Peru, in Lima, and I think then he'd been Ezra Beserot for about 3.5 years. He would serve as a rabbi of Mexico City. In 1977, he and his family moved to Jerusalem, where he was a great scholar over there, a communal leader, a teacher and a judge, a rabbinic judge. And he spent a relatively short time in Seattle, but he left a huge impact in the community over there. Everywhere he went, he was seen as a spiritual figure, and he had great tolerance, compassion, and understanding of himself. And he had energetic work, let's just say, and really raised the religious level of the various communities he went to all throughout. He was like other classic Sephardic rabbis. He was a prayerful person, and he was very, very much just great, very impactful. People, he was really inspired by all his things. He would really mitzchazek the people within regards to genuine prayer. He was like a classic Sephardic rabbi, a magnificent reader of the Torah. He had a melodious voice, let's just say, himself. He was a great shliach tzibor. And also he had a wonderful sense of humor. That's interesting enough. Very natural manner in himself. He had great sermons, classes, profound reverence. Rabbi Angel describes it and really the goal was to inspire in all of his lectures, to inform, elevate congregants and students, and really bring them in. He authored, Rabbi Shalem, also important Torah works in Halakha, Jewish law, and in Jewish thought, let's just say reflecting impressive erudition and staunch traditionalism in himself, but they reflected like his loving personalities in every single aspect, and compassion, and so on and so forth. I think very interesting enough. Obviously he was very genuine also, and really was great, really inspirational over there. I think so he was a great rabbi. He was a rabbi in Mexico, who I have to point out. Now another chief rabbi of Mexico was someone named Rabbi Abraham Levi Villalobos. Very interesting enough. I think he was a rabbi of the community, if I'm not mistaken, and he was connected also to Rabbi Nissim Elenkeba, I think born in Mexico City, of Turkish Jewish family, and Niso Palti, who was from Mexico also, respectively, over here. So he was a prominent rabbi, Rabbi Abraham Levi, in of itself. So that's another key rabbi. I wasn't able to find out so much information on him, but another great rabbi. Another rabbi, I think from Mexico City, is Rabbi Nissim El-Nekaba. Who is Rabbi Nissim El-Nekaba? El-Nekaba actually happens to be a famous rabbinic family name also. So he was born in Mexico City, with roots from both Istanbul and Salonika. I think in 2016, Rabbi Nissim Nekava became the executive director of the newly reinvigorated Sephardic Brotherhood of America. Interesting enough, so we've spoken about that before. He recruited numerous young people. I think they've got a weekly online newspaper called the La Voz Sephardi, which includes the Joah stories in English, Ladino, audio recordings, and achieved cherished literal songs, as it's described over here, of great cantors, Shliach Sibors, and I think very much connected to the Zemirot.org website in itself. He himself was born in Mexico City, as said before, to Turkish Jews, and grew up in a Ladino-speaking Sephardic community. He actually was trained by the Sheheba Sephardic Center, which we've spoken about before on various occasions before. We actually recorded a video here, and the famous Yeshivat Porat Yosef. He received a rabbinic ordination from the Sheheba Sephardic Center and the chief rabbinate of Israel. Interesting enough, he actually translated historic Ladino books for Yeshiva University, and is passionate about strengthening, let's just say, Ladino in the rich heritage in itself, and has many recordings online. So that's very, very interesting. I think just going back to Rabbi Abraham Levi Villa Lobos, he was a Sephardic chief rabbi, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm not too sure what age. He passed away at 82 years of age, and he actually arrived to Mexico in the year 1923. He was actually from Istanbul also, and he would serve many, many years also in the Sephardic Bet in the Jewish court over there, respectively. So very, very interesting. Let's speak a bit more about the Sephardic Jewish community in Mexico. I think now that we're here, I think there's a very good article go from the Gent, respectively. And so it actually encompasses about that community. I think the community itself is a Sephardic one. I'm not too sure about which year this was actually written, but I think there's approximately 5,000 members. I'm not too sure if this is including Eidut Mizrach itself, but let's say the majority are from Greece, Turkey, and the Balkans. Let's just say respectively. I don't know if this is including the Eidut Mizrach people in of itself. And I think most of them are in the Teket Machalo neighborhood in Mexico City, and the Shara Shamayim synagogue, the Gates of Heaven synagogue, happens to be the main one over there. It features a Turkish Sephardic liturgy and is a forefront in community practices over there. They have daily prayer services, Shabbat, and Jewish festivals. Now, anyone tuning in, please subscribe to the channel and join our community. We've got fantastic content over here as we're speaking about the history of the Mexican Jewish community. Now, the Sephardic community itself, this specific community, remember there's different sections. I think there's a special Sephardic K-12 school, the Collegia Hebrew Sephardi, and located, I think, in the Central Synagogue also. There's also the Majazik Torah group that prepares the students for Bar Mitzvah and the reading of the Parashat HaShavua, specifically, obviously, in the Sephardic tradition. There's Bat Mitzvah courses also over there, where they teach Jewish values to the girls at that point in time, giving them tools for community leaders. There's a community kollel, I think, over there, adult Jewish learning center, classes for university students, entrepreneurs, and general public, and activities relevant for the Jewish calendar in of itself. I think of this specific community, Sephardic community over there, there's no official chief rabbi. They do have a chief rabbi and two assistant rabbis and director of Jewish education. Remember, I don't know if it's the chief rabbi of the entire Mexican community, but of this specific community. They have a Sephardic Foundation of Mexico, which is in charge of raising funds and distributing them to families in the community of need. And this foundation, which helps loan of medical equipment, as well as school scholarships. There's a Bikur Kulim committee also over there. And they have innovative ways of providing members with a meaningful approach to Judaism. There's a new Spanish language Sephardic courses, I think, and Sephardic Digital Academy. And I think they're actually partnered with Sephardic Brotherhood. This could be talking about communities more connected to the Ottoman, like say Balkans and including Eidut Mizrach and Aleppo. Let's speak about Aleppo Jewish community in Mexico. Interesting enough, I think there is, let's just say, I think there's a vibrant Aleppian community that's been for many, many years. I think the Mexican Jewish community, obviously, just go back a bit, started in the 20th century. especially when the Aleppian people, the Chalabi, and the Damascus Jews arrived. These are Jews from Syria. They left Syria. Many of those went to Mexico City, Buenos Aires in Argentina, and there was estimated to be 40 to 50,000 Jews in all of Mexico, the majority living in Mexico City. I think, as we mentioned before, they would move to Guadalajara, Monterrey, and Cancun, and there were 4 established communities in Mexico City: the Aleppians, the Shamis, the Jews from Damascus, the Sephardic, the Turks and the Greeks, and Ashkenazi Jews. So over there. So that 5,000 figure we said before about Sephardic Jews, it wasn't really including the Aleppians and possibly the Eidut Mizrach ones over there in of itself. So each one had its own chief rabbi, yeshivot, community centers, synagogues, and minhagim. And if we compare the New York Aleppo community to the Mexico one, I think in the beginning when they came to Mexico, the Syrian community was a mixture of both people from Damascus and Aleppo, let's just say, under a leadership of a shared rabbinical council, unlike in America. The Aleppians and Damascus were separate, are completely separate communities in Mexico City. Also, it could have been they were sharing it in New York, but they were separate in Mexico. I'll have to double check that. Let's see, in cases where there's intermarriage between the communities, the minhag, the husband takes precedence. So say, for example, if someone of Aleppian man get married to a woman, they'll obviously take the man's customs. Thus, if a husband is a Shammai and the wife is Aleppian, they become members of the Shammai community. So it's actually passed on from there. So there was probably, it was very common in those days, let's just say, for people to get married into different families over here. So we're exploring over here about the, let's just say, the community of Aleppo, respectively, over there. Over here in the special edition. Anyone joining in live, please subscribe to the channel. We're a community here, over here, and we're exploring the history of Mexico over here on the special edition. Now, what's interesting is here, the Brooklyn Syrian community's first chief rabbi was Rabbi Yaakov Kassin, who came in 1933 to America. His older brother, Rabbi Avram Kassin, settled in Mexico City in 1931, and he would become the chief rabbi of Mexico, Rabbi Avram Kassin would. And I think there was a Aleppian yeshiva Keter Torah which operated by Rabbi David Kassin, who was the son of Rabbi Avram Kassin, and he was the 6th of his 10 children. And very, very interesting. And there's the famous Los Judios de Aleppo in Mexico, and contains a history of the community and the family trees of the original families that arrived on the shores of Veracruz, or the Mexican entry port of immigrants. Very interesting enough. Other key members in Mexico community includes Makos Abadi and Mary Lobotan family, which are, let's just say, the Lebaton family in New York. There's a Mexican branch of this family seen as wondrous, let's just say, in of itself. So, the family. So, very, very interesting. The first synagogue of this Aleppian community was Rofei Tzedek, which was built in Colonia, Roma in the year 1932, the year after Rabbi Avram Kassin would arrive in 1933. In 1965, the community built a Magen David synagogue in Polanco area. These buildings corresponded with the Brooklyn community Magen David congregation, which was built in 1920s in Bensonhurst, and Shari Tzion was opened in 1960s. Similarly, Rofei Tzedek, like Magen David in Bensonhurst, is also used for funeral services, respectively. Now, the president of the Magen David synagogue, I think this was, I don't know if he still is or not, this was from maybe about 10, 15 years ago, was Isaac Hamul Musal, the father of Dr. Liz Hamoy, if I'm not mistaken. And Rabbi Sadek Harari was a chief rabbi of the time. So another key rabbi, Rabbi Harari, actually happens to be, which I have to point out. And the synagogue building has 2 Beit Midrashes, a social hall, a library, a room of study, built in modern style, let's just say, decorated with a great art, magnificent Star of David at the entrance. And the Torah Ark was renovated, I believe, in the year 1985 by an artist called Enrique Shaw. And virtually all the community weddings were held in Magen David synagogue until 2003. I think there was another large synagogue opened in the newly built Magen David Community Center. I think in modern day, the Aleppian community has about 50 synagogues and places to worship. I don't know if this is everywhere across the world or in a specific area itself. It's interesting. The community's yeshiva system evolved on the same path as the yeshiva system in Brooklyn. I think in 1950, all of the Aleppian Jewish children in Mexico City received something called a kitab, a small community school where a boy attends until bar mitzvah age. Education from a Talmud Torah in the colonial Roma area, and after-school programs there were. From the 1950s to 1970s, the community had moved to Polanco, and the system would change in that children received public education provided by the Mexican government, and they would receive in the afternoon the Jewish education also respectively. And in 1960s, as we mentioned before, 1960s, someone named Rabbi Avram Shabbat, he founded the Keter Torah Yeshiva, which opened for grades 7 to 12, and I think today operates as a full-day school. In the 1970s, Ateret Yosef would open up under the supervision of Rabbi David Shweki, now the key figure in Mexican Jewish history community also, who we have to mention about. Okay, so I think it was in the first 50 years, the Aleppian community of Mexico had no professional, let's say, class, but much similar to Brooklyn. There were teachers in yeshivot that came from Ashkenazi, from community, interesting enough. So they would actually bring a lot of Ashkenazi teachers, which would influence, let's just say, the community and provided, let's say, a more ultra-Orthodox blend of Judaism. At the same time, very, very much so. They influenced, I think, this influence would decrease the Judeo-Arabic culture in communities. And the Mexican community sent its young men, I believe, to the Lubavitch Rabbinical Seminary, where they had to learn, I think, Yiddish to actually receive their rabbinical ordination at that point in time. Now, I think in the 1970s, the Aleppian community in Mexico City would have its first real day college Hebrew Magen David with a better academic program. In the 1990s, I think Atid opened up. And Atid is a Jewish day school of choice for the Syrian Aleppian Jewish community, let's say academic education of high quality. And students don't just receive Jewish education in Hebrew, but they also, I think, learn English. And I think Rabbi Shlomo Tawil is the current chief rabbi, if I'm not mistaken. And the chief rabbi of the Damascus community is someone named Rabbi Abraham Tubal, if I'm not mistaken, who actually comes from Argentina. Rabbi Tubal, I think, succeeded Rabbi Salvador Hilo, who was also a Chalabi rabbi of Aleppian descent, who actually attended this Lubavitch Yeshiva in New York. And their college Mount Sinai, was founded in the year 1943. Now, the Aleppian community also has a burial society and a Bikur Cholim, and numerous social services, including a Kadima, an adult program for people with special needs, teaching skills. I think the Central Magen David, the Aleppian Community Center, is probably, let's say, one of the highlights itself. And I think it's built on 25 acres. It was opened in 2003, so quite recently. Has a synagogue, a social hall, a TID school, classes for children, a computer center, I believe also, operated by Orts Mexico, a gymnasium, round-year activities, and it was actually designed by Elias Fascher Lobaton, and the facility was built under supervision of Isaac Hamway during, let's say, his term as president of the community. And it was built in Hamway's first term as the community's president, and very, very interesting. So more can be said within regards to that over here. Anyone tuning in live, we're exploring the history of the Jewish community of Mexico. Now, the Aleppian community in Mexico City, let's say, uses the Takana, they use this specific Takana, this enactment we talked about, against marriage to converts, issued by Brooklyn's Syrian Jewish Rabbinic Council back in the year 1935. In 1986, I think the Mexican community itself issued its own Takana decree. Their Takana is unpublished due to concerns about anti-Semitism, and there are major differences between the two Takanot, between the one in America and the one, I think, the one in Mexico City. So I'll leave you all to explore within regards to that also respectively. Very, very interesting. So let's speak a bit more about the Mexican Jewish community in itself. I think there was an earthquake at one stage in time in Mexico. I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was back in the year 2017, no, about 7-8 years ago, happened to be, where I think Mexico, this earthquake would actually see someone named Jami Ashkenazi, who was a famous person in Mexico synagogue, who was among hundreds of victims of this earthquake that would actually hit Mexico. He was famously a gabbai of the Magen David synagogue in Mexico City, so that really shook the community big time at that point in time, which is obviously based in Mexico City. And he was the owner of a textile business located in the city center. And the building, I think, collapsed in an earthquake. I think it was on September the 19th in 2017. And there were 3 destructive earthquakes in Mexico on that specific month. And he very much did a lot of chesed work for the community itself, especially during the high holy days. I was seen as someone that was just very, very great. He was actually Argentinian originally, and he lived in Mexico for 40 years. I think there was a similar earthquake in 1985, which he survived at that point in time. And but he was seen as very, very chesed-oriented man. And he, I think, had some daughters and a son, all married with children. He is the father-in-law of Mexico's chief rabbi, Rabbi Shlomo Tawil, which is also a key thing. So Rabbi Shlomo Tawil, who we just spoke about just before, and his son also is a rabbi and an instructor of the Ateret Yosef Elementary School, interesting enough. So that's very, very good. Obviously, we mentioned about the Magen David being the main synagogue for descendants of Syrian Jews from Aleppo. And very, very interesting. So that's another point, let's just say. I think Ashkenazi, he actually grew up in the Jewish neighborhood of a once Argentine capital of Buenos Aires, if I'm not mistaken. He would be also, I think at that point in time, I think afterwards he would end up in Mexico afterwards, and really, really made his mark in Mexico in of itself. So I think Rabbi Shlomo Tawil has jurisdiction as rabbi of various different synagogues in Mexico, including Beit Knesset Eliyahu Fazja, if I'm not mistaken, and various other places also. I think connected once again to the Magen David place, so very, very interesting. So as we explore the history over here of the Mexican Jewish community over here, how they came about in that point in time. Now, there was in the 1920s, we have to point out, there was other great famous rabbis that actually come to Mexico, especially a rabbi named Rabbi Mordechai Atiyah. He was an enterprising rabbi who led the formation of a group of young disciples, and I think because of him, or partly because of him, the Rofei Tzedek temple was inaugurated in 1932 in the early years, and he was a key figure, let's just say, within regards to Aleppian Jewry and the Mexican Jewry in itself. So that's very, very important to point out. So as we explore, we've just been speaking about the Magen David Jewish community over here. That's obviously featured in Syria, just like it is also featured in Brooklyn. Very, very interesting enough. So we're going to speak more within regards to it. There's I believe, let's speak about other rabbis that are currently rabbis in Mexico. There is Rabbi Dr. Isaac Sitt, who is leads a Colegio Orachaim or Chaim school in Mexico City. I think he's a current rabbi over there. He's got many years of experience in Jewish education. He also serves, I think, as the youth rabbi in a local community in Mexico City, also of it. And he imparts teachings, let's just say, from Dr. Jonathan Sachs, who was a former chief rabbi of England, Rabbi Hirsch, Rabbi Soloveitchik, and he also leads a Choshen Mishpat Kollel, if I'm not mistaken. And he actually got a BA in psychology in the Mexican National University, a master's in Yeshiva University, and a doctoral dissertation on religion and spirituality, let's just say, in itself, and has penned 3 books in Spanish, focusing on philosophical explorations of Torah values, let's just say, in itself. And he, I think, currently resides in Mexico City. Interesting enough. Another key rabbi in Mexico is Rabbi Nissim Hilu, and he is, let's just say, currently one of the most respected rabbis in the kashrut field. Over there, he's also an entrepreneur. He's a leader, especially in kosher improvement, and created cohesive training awareness programs in Mexico, also in Colombia and in Panama. 26 years of experience plus in the food industry of kashrut, let's just say, respectively, also, which is very interesting. It's got much professional experience inside this field in itself. Among he was educated in various top places. I think, if I'm not mistaken, especially in the 1980s, and he actually received rabbinic ordination from many great rabbis, including Rabbi Ovadi Yosef in 1988, Rabbi Yosef Aders, also Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu, former chief rabbi, also Rabbi Shlomo Machbod, who was a leading tower in the kashrut industry in Israel, and then Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef also. He would actually be trained, I think, between January 1989 to March 1993. Also, he has various decorated accolades. I think from Me'or Abraham Institute in Mexico, got a diploma. I think from Noam Institute, a diploma in kosher quality systems, and that was part of the Kollel Givat Shaul Israel diploma, and was part of the Birkat Shmuel University, I think, also, and Kol Torah and various other places. He would get industrial degrees also. Now, I think Chabad of Mexico, as I mentioned before, have many synagogues, and it's part of the global Chabad Lubavitch movement. Let's speak about them for a minute. I think it was founded in the mid-20th century. In Mexico, they give community service programs, religious activities, fostering Jewish identity, and they play itself a pivotal role in supporting local Jewish communities. They provide huge amounts of outreach, festival classes, and communal gatherings also, respectively. Also, so very, very interesting. So we spoke about Rabbi Nissim Elner Bekeve before. Just say another word within regards to him. He's obviously a rabbinic educator, very much Mexican, let's just say, itself, family descendant of Ottoman Ladino. We mentioned about how he received his rabbinic ordination from the Shehebat Sephardic Center in Yeshivat Porat Yosef, and he was a staff consultant also in Yeshiva University, and really a key figure also. Now, another rabbi that would actually I believe would actually be in Mexico at one window of time was famous Rabbi Jose Figura in of itself. So he was a famous Sephardic scholar, let's just say, so very, very well traveled, if I'm not mistaken, extremely well traveled. He was a rabbi that knew many languages, and he actually was in Mexico City, I think, at the age of 17. He would move there and was an administrator in a Talmud Torah there for a period of time. And he eventually, Rabbi Thau, would end up in the Bet Midrash Gavoa in Lakewood, in New Jersey, and was one of the first Sephardic students to be admitted there. And he actually knew many languages. That was actually helping, because I think some of the classes were in Yiddish at that point in time. So he was able to follow it because of his German, and he was so brilliant that even the Rosh Hashiva, I think Rabbi Aaron Kotler, recognized his great mind, let's just say, in of itself, and was able to learn under Rabbi Kotler also, and let's just say he had a great understanding of all different worlds, especially the classic Sephardic world, but also its intellectual tradition of the Lithuanian Haredi Yeshiva flagship, let's just say, in of itself. So he had a key role in Mexico. I think, he ended up obviously in America afterwards, and much is actually spoken within regards to him, how he was a proud Sephardic scholar and had broader scholarly pursuits in of itself, let's just say. We spoke about him in a dedicated video, if I'm not mistaken. This was a few months ago. There's other Sephardic rabbis at the moment currently in Mexico, including Rabbi Moshe Folders, Rabbi Yoshua Levi, and Rabbi Yosef Ben Shimon, all, I think, graduates from the Shehebat Sephardic Center also, and have key roles, I think, in the country Mexico, respectively, over here. Very, very interesting. So I think also the Torah stone, they actually provide rabbis also, if I'm not mistaken, in Mexico, if I'm not mistaken. There's Rabbi Freundlich, if I'm not mistaken, who was, I'm not too sure if he still is the rabbi over there, but they are doing huge amounts of work also representing the Torah Stone organization in Mexico. So that's something that we have to point about also. So another chief rabbi, I think more representing the Ashkenazi community, was a rabbi named Rabbi Dr. Abraham Mordechai Hirschberg, who was a chief rabbi of Mexico. And he was also an international, let's just say, religious negotiations expert. He was an author, he was a foreign diplomat, if I'm not mistaken. And he was another key figure, let's just say, in Mexican Jewry during his time period, let's just say. And many people learned huge amounts within regards to him. I think Rabbi Dr. Abraham Mordechai Hirschberg, he was actually born in Poland, if I'm not mistaken. This was in the year 5676. and I think his father died before he was born, and he was named after his father. I think before his bar mitzvah, he was accepted into great yeshivot, I think the Chachmei Lubin, and was considered one of the most outstanding Talmidim over there, scholars. I think during the Second World War, he fled to Vilna and would eventually end up in Shanghai in Japan. In 1942, he arrived in Canada, then went to the United States of America and landed in Chicago. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe asked to meet him, to meet his son-in-law at that point in time, the Ramash, and they discussed Torah subjects, and they would have a 40-year relationship and speaking about life constantly. After, I think his passing, Rabbi Hirschberg, I believe, was a chief rabbi of Mexico and founder of the president of Latin America Bet-Din Association, the World Organization of Peace and Freedom. Very interesting enough, so much can be said within regards to him. I think in 1960 it was, Rabbi Hirschberg moved to Mexico. He would spend the next several decades of his life building synagogues, yeshivot, mikvaot in Mexico City. And let's say he was the first person, one of the first people to inspire Latin American Jewry to pray and study in a great manner, let's just say himself. His job was primarily to serve as a Jewish leader for Latin America. He happened to find time to carry out many secret religious missions across the globe also at the same time, so we have to do it, and achieved much. He spent time in Egypt also, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and he was in correspondence with various presidents from all across the world, we have to point out. He was able to, he was able to rescue the chief rabbi of Iran, Rabbi Cohen Tzedek, if I'm not mistaken, and would take on many different missions all throughout his life. Very, very interesting enough. So he was a famous rabbi. I hope we'll speak about him on another occasion, Bezrat Hashem. I think he passed away in 1985, and he was buried in Har HaZeitim, Mount of Olives burial plot in Jerusalem. Anyone tuning in, please subscribe to the channel now. We're a community here, and we're learning about the country Mexico over here on this special edition. So another head rabbi in Mexico was someone named Rabbi Dr. Yaakov, also known as Jacob Avigdor. He lived between 1896 and 1967. He was a Polish-Mexican rabbi, author, and a Holocaust survivor. I think he would serve as a chief rabbi of Drobich in Poland, in Borislav, and after the war, he was Ashkenazi community, a chief rabbi of Mexico. I think it was chief rabbi over there. He was actually born from a rabbinic family in a shtetl, I think the Tyra Wolowska, in the Austrian province of Galicia, I think between the cities of Sanok and Przemysl, which is South Poland. He would study in universities in Krakow, and before that he would excel in his religious studies, let's just say. He would study in universities in Krakow and Lviv. He would get a PhD in philosophy. He was a great orator and a Gemara scholar, let's just say. He was named the chief rabbi of those areas in southeast Poland, obviously now western Ukraine. In 1920, he would be there, but then I think there was a Nazi occupation at that point in time. He would also be the head of Jewish court. And it's actually interesting, he actually officiated the wedding of the future Prime Minister of Israel Menachem Begin, to Lisa Arnold in May 1939, which took place in Poland, if I'm not mistaken. So he's famous also for that, let's just say, in himself. He was, sadly lost his wife during the Holocaust, and his two daughters and his brother David, the rabbi of Andrew Chow, among many family members, very, very sad. After his liberation from the Buchenwald concentration camp, Rabbi Avigdor became extremely active in efforts of rescue and rehabilitation of the Jewish community refugees in post-war Europe at that point in time. And I think after immigrating to the United States in 1946, he accepted a pulpit in Brooklyn, and 6 years later, in 1952, he was offered the rabbinate of Mexico, holding that position until he passed away in Mexico City in 1967. That would be about a 15-year period in of itself. I think he was much consulted in religion and ethical questions. He was a writer on topics including religious philosophy, Jewish history, traditions, and commentary on the Torah itself, respectively. That's something we have to point out. And I think the Holocaust Museum at Yad Vashem holds a Hebrew calendar written by him from memory during the state of Buchenwald, if I'm not mistaken, over there. So that's something we have to point out. And he had famously, I think Rabbi Isaac C. Avigdor, his son, also survived the war. and I think they would have a famous reunion, if I'm not mistaken, at some point in time. Now, Jewish Mexican cuisine, let's speak about that for a minute, take a break. And they have great dishes, let's just say, in themselves that have Jewish origins. For example, buñuelos is a quintessential, let's just say, Mexican dish. I think it's more of a, let's just say, a Western dish. It's actually seen as a wintry holiday dish of golden deep-fried balls of cheese-infused dough. Actually originates from Sephardic Hanukkah dish, if I'm not mistaken, over there. I think the oil used to fry these snacks were originally meant to invoke the miracle of the oil of Hanukkah. Some theorize that springtime Mexican dish, capirotrad, let's say, which got sweet cheese and drenched in syrup, originate with Mexican Jews as a way of disguising the consumption of unleavened bread during Passover. There's other famous rich connotations to Mexican dishes. The pan de semita is an iconic sesame seed stud roll of Mexico's Puebla region, if I'm not mistaken. And there's a roast suckling goat enjoyed in and around Mexico City, especially of Monterrey, if I'm not mistaken, which is also another popular dish in of itself. So that's another one. And there's flautas, tortillos, sops, chalapos, and different famous Mexican dishes which are very, very popular all over the world. Let's go back a bit. I'm just going to use an article over here from the World Jewish Congress, and they talk about over here the years of the Holocaust of Mexico, what actually happened at that stage in time. And anyone tuning in live, welcome to our channel, and please subscribe to our channel over here, as we're going to explore a bit within regards, go back to the Holocaust time period. I think in the years preceding World War II, anti-Semitism rose in Mexico in conjunction at the point because of economic conditions. There was a rise, as we said before, of xenophobia in the late 1930s that saw a population law in 1936 that established different immigration quotas that severely restricted immigration from nations with large Jewish populations, such as in Poland and Russia. And so that was a problem. They were fleeing Nazism at that stage in time, which I have to point out. During the Second World War, Mexico exported, let's say, basic food goods to the United States of America, and the country's internal market strengthened. The Mexican economy experienced a general rise in industries created, and among those benefited were several Jewish entrepreneurs who established manufacturing factories during the 1940s. After the war, the Jewish community began, I think, participating in various industries throughout the country and in general experienced economic prosperity at that point in time. So that's something we had to point out, especially during the wartime period in of itself. Let's just speak more about the current demography. I think as of 2024, according to the World Jewish Congress website, 41,000 Jews are living there, if I'm not mistaken. I think the demographer's name is Sergio Della Pergola, which makes it the third largest Jewish community in Latin America. The World Population Review notes that Mexico had the 13th largest Jewish population in the world as of 2023. And 75%, as I mentioned before, live in Mexico City, but they're found all over the place, including Tijuana, Cancun, Monterrey, and various other places. Also, community life, let's talk more about it in regards to it. Obviously, it's based largely divided on Ashkenazic and Sephardic Jewish ethnicity. They have their own institutions. Comité Central de la Comunidad Judía de Mexico acts as an umbrella organization for various Jewish groups in Mexico, working to advocate on Mexican Jewry, governmental, political, religious. Each community provides various services, including religious, cultural, social. I think there's many branches of international Zionistic youth organizations, social organizations there, which are active in the Mexican Jewish community. Now, friends, I'm going to take a very short break over here, and we are going to continue with speaking about the religious community and the history of Mexican Jewish community itself. So welcome to our channel, and in the meantime, just wait 1 minute. I'll be back in 1 minute and we'll continue this video. So in the meantime, please subscribe to the channel also, really appreciate it. Yeah, thanks everyone for waiting. We are exploring the history of the Mexican Jewish community here on this special edition over here. So welcome everyone to our channel if you are new, and we're speaking about the religious and cultural life now about Mexico, respectively. Now, I think the Mexico Jewish community currently is very, very active. It's actually estimated 95% of members affiliated with an institution involved in Jewish religious life will mostly identify as Orthodox or conservative. There are many synagogues in Mexico, with about 25 alone in Mexico City. Many Mexican Jewish organizations, they vary, let's say, in religious affiliations. The Orthodox-oriented organizations include the Sociedad de Beneficia Alianza Monte Sinai, which obviously was founded by the Jews, I think, from Damascus and Lebanon. The Comunidad Ashkenazi was founded by Jews of Central and Eastern Europe. The Comunidad Magen David, obviously from Aleppo, which we spoke about, Syria. And Comunidad Sephardi was more from Jews from Turkey, Greece, and the Balkans. Let's say, I think conservative organizations have their own organizations in Mexico also, respectively. Now, Jewish educations reported over, currently there are 16 Jewish day schools in Mexico. About a dozen of these schools are actually located in Mexico City. It's estimated that around 95% of Jewish children in Mexico attend Jewish day schools, very high amount. There's a large variety of schools ranging in religiosity, Zionistic, secularism, all of which teach Hebrew and English. There is one school with a Montessori system, and the Jewish schools are considered among the best in the country. The schools are coordinated by a Ba'ad Hajinuj, I believe, which supports a Hebraic university where Jewish teachers are trained. All the schools provide scholarships for families that cannot afford to pay tuition. Very interesting enough. There's youth organizations there also, I think, which have programs active throughout various Jewish communities in Mexico. There's a Jewish media over there. Newspapers, magazines reflecting, let's say, the ideological trends of different communities, including the Imagine David, the Identidad Monte Sinai, Notay Kel, Encurto, Periodico CDI, the Enfoco Beit El, Kesher, and many other books. Now, Israel and Mexico itself, they have relations, they've maintained full diplomatic relations between 1952. In 2000, a free trade agreement was signed between the two countries. In recent years, there's been increased security cooperation. Reported over 3 Israeli presidents have visited Mexico: Ephraim Katzir, Moshe Katsav, and Shimon Peres. And I think in 2017, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu became the first Israeli Prime Minister to visit Mexico and Latin America. And later that year, the Israeli Defense Forces and the ISRAID sent humanitarian supplies into the earthquake-stricken region of Oaxaca and Chiapas after the 8.1 earthquake hit that specific area in of itself. So very, very interesting. Yeah, so I think the Torah stone itself, we spoke about before, had, I think, would have been in Mexico City between 2001 and 2013, but they came back in 2014. Let's speak about them. They have a kollel which serves the Yavna community over there, which we spoke about before, located in Yavna school and community. I think this is based in the K-12 school in Mexico. And the Torah stone actually provides shlichim to work in this Yavna high schools with community members itself, respectively. And they bring about loads of different Torah classes, very much connected to B'nai Akiva organization and programs, let's just say, in of itself, where they have Shabbatonim, they have different activities in nighttime, And they've had various Rosh Kollels of this Kollel Yavne, including Rabbi Nachum and Rabbinate Rivka Nereya between 2001 and 2003, Rabbi Guy Tal between 2015 to 2018. He was with his rabbinate over there working together, Rabbinate Fentea, and Rabbi Otniel and Rabbinate Svia Fendel, I think between quite recently, from 2023, if I'm not mistaken, representing the Torah Stone. Now, very interesting. We're going to speak and learn about, just using an article from the Mishpacha magazine, within regards to a visionary, someone named Moshe Tusye, who realized that the only way for yeshiva day schools to succeed in Mexico would be to import a kollel along with it. So now we're speaking basic, let's just say how dozens of kollels have started up in Mexico in current day, all from this vision of someone named Moshe Tusye, I think, and I'm just going to adapting a Mishpacha magazine article within regards to it. I think the main boulevard of Mexico City, in the Polanco neighborhood, let's just say it's like a 13th Avenue in Borough Park, but in a Spanish version, let's just say in itself. Let's just say there's many kollel people, obviously carry Gemaras, surrounded by high-rise buildings over there. I'm just using the article from Mishpacha. But what's interesting is that it was a very slow change in Mexico at that point in time. I think Rabbi David Shweki was a founding Rosh Kollel who arrived 45 years prior. He was, I think, part of the Mir Yeshiva in Flatbush, and he would originally talk about Mexico's community, but now it boasts more than 4 dozen kollels of nearly 600 homegrown yeshiva talent itself. But it wasn't always like that. This Moshe Tuseye, I think he actually pronounces last name, he had this vision originally many years before to make a strong Torah community in Mexico, let's just say, on previous points of time. And let's just say he, I think, had a connection with Rabbi Aaron Leib Steinman and famous Rabbi Chaim Pinchas Steinberg, great rabbis at that point in time. And he really had a vision when he was younger. He grew up, I think, Rabbi Moshe Tuseye, in a poor household in Mexico City neighborhood. I think the neighborhood was actually called Roma, and I think there was a frum community there, but it was a more poorer community. His father, Rabbi Tuseye's father, was Rabbi Ezra Tuseye, who was a shochet and a chazan over there, shliach tzibur, a cantor. He attended himself a local cheder. He was taught alphabet and chumash in local Jewish school, I think, over there. There was a curriculum there, and very much so. And I think one day in 1950s, a fundraiser of the famous Brooklyn's Yeshiva Torah Vadat came to Rabbi Ezra Tawil at that point in time. He was a wealthy businessman who had recently moved to nearby Polanco, becoming the locals' second, let's say, really strong family over there. And Rabbi Tawil at that point said to the Meshulach, I just moved into the neighborhood and it's not really strong in mitzvot over here. So he actually asked at that point in time, what should he do over there? And the rabbi, I think from Yeshiva Torah Vadat, would say he would take a few of the children to Torah Vadat and give them a strong, solid Jewish education over there at that point in time. That was the advice he would give them over there. So Rabbi Ezra Tawil would dispatch his 3 sons, as well as younger brothers Yitzhak and Raul, and they would go to the Premier Yeshivot on East 9th Street in Brooklyn. And this would obviously make a huge shockwave in the small Jewish community of Mexico. And a group of 6 other parents came to Rabbi Ezra Tawil, entreating him to allow their children to go along. Ultimately, 10 fresh-faced children opted to make the pilgrimage, making for a Mexican contingent of 15 students who showed up in New York. 2 of these were 12-year-old Moshe Tuseye at that point in time, and his 9-year-old brother. When they came there, Mr. Tuseye was... They thought everyone was Geonim over there. They would study for 7 years Talmud at the Talmud Torah over there, teaching really top level Torah over there. Introduction, let's just say, very high level Gemara learning and Chavrutot over there, and really strengthening these students to become top people over there. I think Rosh Yeshiva at the time was Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, and at that point in time, I think in Mexico, they were obviously, the family itself were longing to have their children back, but they knew that they were learning top-level Torah in Brooklyn over there respectively. And I think Mr. Tuesday at that point in time, I think would eventually get married and would pray very hard for his, and I think he would marry Rabbi Tawil's daughter, Rabbanit Rosa, if I'm not mistaken, who was a great tzaddiket. And during their marriage, they had a great blossomous relationship, great shalom bayit. They had 5 children, raised 5 great children in of itself, Torah family in of itself. And it was a process to, let's just say, strengthen this kollel community. And as I said before, this where it starts off with no kollels in Mexico, I think now 30, as many as 30 kollels would come at a period of time, let's just say, about a point in time. I think they would really start their dream in the year 1975 when they received a visit from the famous Rabbi Moshe Pardo, who was the founder of Orach Chaim, the first Bet Yaakov for Sephardic girls in Bnei Brak. And he would get great advice from him, the famous Moshe Tzusei would, and really was close to Rabbi Pardo over there, and really instruct him and infuse him with a belief that they could make a potential of great Torah-ness in Mexico. And I think there was an Avenue Sophocles building over there where he purchased, and there was a rabbi named Rabbi David Masuri, who was one of his friends, we have to point out, who went along with him originally to Yeshivat Torah Vadat, and he would serve as a manager of the Bet Yaakov, which began with 4 teachers and 6 girls, including Mr. Tusei's younger daughter. And the kollel will actually come at that point in time in Mexico. I think he wanted someone to put like great education in Mexico on a map. And he did a scouting trip in New York and found a rabbi named Rabbi Avram Badouche. He was actually a Moroccan-born Rosh Yeshiva who'd studied, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in Rav Moshe Schneider's yeshiva in London as a refugee bocher. Spent 10 years in the land of Israel in Yeshivat Hebron. He got married in France, Rabbi Bodash did, and moved to Monsey, where he raised 9 children. And then when Rabbi Bodash was headhunted, let's say, from Rabbi Moshe Tusei and local Balabatim over there, they would start a cheder. He was a Rosh Yeshiva of the Chachmei Sephard in Monsey at the time, which he founded with 30 students whom he drafted from Morocco, and he served as mashkiach at Rabbi Abba Berman's Ian HaTalmud Yeshiva. Rabbi Badush would arrive in Mexico City as a kollel dream started a year before, in 1976, with his wife and children. They started a Jewish day school over there, but insisted early on that the only way to make it work was to create a kollel over there alongside it, to bring families where their husbands would learn Torah and the wives would teach over there. Very interesting enough. Every obedient Da'at Torah, Mr. Tusei didn't waste any time. He immediately went out in search of a building and found vacancies in an apartment complex. I think Mr. Tusei, I think his kollel would be the first of dozens to start off this dream in itself. Once they got a building, Rabbi Badush would need a Rosh Kollel and a group of young families. He convinced Rabbi David Shweki, who was the uncle of singer Rabbi Yaakov Shweki, to be his first in-house Rosh Kollel. Rabbi Shweki, born in Egypt, he was actually from Assyrian Jewish parents, was learning, I think at that point in time, the Mir Yeshiva in Flatbush, and he happened to have been Rosh Yeshiva of Rabbi Shmuel Berenbaum's second Seder Chavruta when Rabbi Badush approached him. Very interesting enough. I think at first he was more hesitant, but offered the option of visiting with his wife for a week, no obligation. They came and went back and impressed, let's say, with Mexico's potential. Rabbi Shweki, joined by 6 families who arrived in 1977. Mr. Tusei recruited the first tranche of Brooklyn younger people, let's just say, by offering a living salary, 2 annual free flights home to any couple that agreed to a 2-year period of itself. And we see that 44 years later, Rabbi David Shweki is still there in Mexico. And look at the Torah empire that has evolved at that point in time. Very, very interesting enough. So, and really his house will become like a center place of yeshivot and Torah fellowship in Mexico. And he was close to many of the great rabbis. You can see pictures of Rabbi Aaron Kotler, the famous Baba Sali, Rabbi Shmuel Birnbaum, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, on his saying, in the pedigree that he had, and he actually received a bracha, I believe, from the Baba Sali, and very much, and many of the greatest Sephardic Gedolim also respectively. During these 4 decades, let's just see, Rabbi Shweki, who obviously heads the Mostot Aram Sova network over there, just talks about how Rabbi Badosh understood straight away how in order to establish a school, you have to have a kollel, because if the children grow there, but there's no growth in the home parallel to it, it's not going to be as great, as potent at that point in time. So you see what eventually happened. And there's the Magen David school network, where they provide so much for the Mexican Jewish community in itself, and the Avrechim, they instill so much goodness and greatness, let's just say. And I think a story recalls once that on a Shabbat morning, he was walking, I think, Moshe Tasseh, with the Rosh Kollel Rabbi David Shweki, as they passed an elderly Jew in the opposite direction to the main synagogue. And there was no Eruv in Mexico City when they arrived. And this man was carrying his talit. So Rabbi David Shweki, I think at that point in time, asked him, why don't you use just one of the talitot in the synagogue instead of carrying yours? The man replied, I would, but I'm afraid that they would be puzzled over there, invalid over there. Now the structured family unit was also quite, so you could see there was differences, but they really, really did strengthen Shabbat observance, the communities itself, the synagogues in of itself. And Rabbi Badush and Rabbi Shweki would really, really change the Jewish community over there. They would strengthen, let's just say, kashrut over there to a great level in of itself. And really, the Syrian Jewish community would really, really provide huge amounts, let's just say, in of itself. It's actually interesting. Rabbi David Shweki's son would get married to Rabbi Badush's granddaughter, so you can see how they would actually come about and grow as a family and stuff and get connected family. I think the Emek Cheder of Rabbi Badush would grow from particularly nothing to 600 children. The Keter Torah school would originally have 60 children, so 1,500, and affiliated schools would bring the total to 3,500 children under Haredi auspices, which only started much, much fewer before Rabbi Badush's arrival over there. And you can see the kollel schedule, and there's Balabatim learning every single night, and there's Chavruta Talmudim over there in Mexico, really, really strengthened, let's just say, over these years, let's just say, in of itself. And just all of this came from Mr. Toussey's original vision and starting up kollels over there, but really now it's grown into many hundreds of people learning kollels there. And when the first kollel started, I think Rabbi Shmuel Badush, Rabbi Avram Badush's son, and the current Rosh Yeshiva of Lev Eliyahu, says he heard from the kollel's chief fundraiser that the Munat Chachamim of Mexicans was such that he would sit in his office and a line of people would wait outside to donate money to kollel. Now Mr. Toussey's vision in founding kollel was obviously brought out. His older daughter returned from Denver, and a shidduch was suggested with a Mexican student, someone named, who will become Rabbi David Batesh, who went on to learn in Ponevezh, and really just remembering, let's just say, just greatness, let's just say, in of itself. And he would become the head of the Bet Yaakov school itself. So the kollel originally would transform Mexico City from a Torah backwater to a veritable citadel. Rav Shmuel Baduch recalls that when his father first moved there in 1976, only 3 women covered their hair, and that included the mother, Rav Moshe Malka, a Rosh Kollel from Bnei Brak at that point in time, who originally would come to Mexico to fundraise, and he would abandon his fundraising, instead came regularly to, let's say, bring up halacha observance. And he would be working all over the Jewish calendar. He would sit in Shiva houses, encourage women, cover their hair, do events, Lilul Nishmat, lost relatives, and be busy convincing parents to send their children to various yeshivot, which is very, very interesting. Now, so Mr. Toussey saw the beginning fruits of his labor really, really enrich and, let's just say, just increase at a point in time. He opened tens of kollelim, including separate kollelim in Mexico for Israeli people, and every one of his grandchildren married children of those original members, interesting enough. Now the path of Mr. Toussey's dozens of kollelim, as they came from one another, each one seemingly bringing about the other in its wake. I think they opened a special kollel for the city's small Ashkenazi community also, another that specializes in practical halacha. The last kollel headed, I think, by Rabbi Mordechai Toussey, Mr. Toussey's son, let's just say, served at that point in time, started a service in which Sheilot, let's say, would be able to be asked and texted, let's just say, from various different sites to each other, various enough. And Mexico, I think currently, or more recently, has had as many as 600 Avrechim spread around 50 kollelim. So we can see all of this was thanks to Mr. Toussey's original, let's just say, vision at that stage in time over there. And I think what's interesting about they would actually help with in regards to starting kollelim all over the world, I think. Once again, thanks to Rabbi Badush also, about the success of keeping community anchored in Torah over there, very much, and really does shiurim in itself. They would even start to call it Lakewood, the kollel capital of the world. I think in 2010, Mr. Toussey was asked to get involved in helping a Jewish girl from a Mexican family, if I'm not mistaken, and at that point in time, we moved to New York and was working on Wall Street, and she originally wanted to marry an Arab man, and it was so personal to Mr. Toussey that he would actually go there and meet the person and really encourage her not to marry out of the faith, let's just say, in of itself. So he really was all around the Jewish cycle, all around the Jewish community. He was really trying to help every single person and enrich people with Jewish culture, Jewish halacha, let's just say, in itself, and a great amount of Torah, and so to say, in of itself. So very interesting. And he would also buy tefillins for people that weren't affiliated to Judaism whatsoever. He would help people strengthen themselves in Torah, just all throughout the Jewish. It's Shabbat observance, Torah observance, in all the different Jewish fields in of itself. And very interesting. So I think Rabbi Shmuel Badush has in Shivot, and really infusing davening tefillot all throughout. And he's got a yeshiva gedola, Lev Eliyahu, for example. And many people come all over from the world, let's just say, at various different places, and will really be many Mexican business people, as I say, became their children be bachorim over there, be students over there, and really there's this liquid attitude of Torah flourishing and Torah congregation in of itself, and the Chalabi community over there is absolutely booming and flourishing because of it. The Kehila also, the congregation, has a remarkable success because of this Torah community that has been, let's just say, imbued over here. And there's different projects, Torah projects that started off where there's many apartments that, let's just say, many people would have, let's just say, housings over there for the kollelim and the B'nai Torah over there. And I think Rabbi Yosef Tawil is a prominent Sephardi rabbi over there, was named the chief rabbi of a specific neighborhood, and close to Rabbi Badush also respectively. And various kehilot around the world will see Mexico community as a shining light of how Torah can flourish under the kollel system in of itself. So very interesting that I think there's various tekanot also inside the synagogue, the community, and I think one of the takanot that Sephardi Rabbanim made actually in Mexico was that a chuppah must take place in synagogue. This one takanot over there. This serves as effective deterrence for forbidden marriages, even though I think the Chatam Sofer himself banned this practice in his native Hungary because of opposite reasons, but they would actually assign this over there also respectively. So so Rabbi Badush has brought various different enactments, various strengthenings of Torah. What's actually interesting, I believe, also is that his wife is a Menahelet of the Ram Sova High School, also, which is obviously, we mentioned about before, is based in Mexico also, and various different things. And I think Rabbi Asher Zriken, who is also famous over there, lives in the gated community in the center of Polanica. He was born actually in Morocco and learned Tashba, I think, Rav Hasidic Kollel, England. He got married and started a biblical career. He moved to Mexico, Rabbi Zriken did, in 1975, and was a chief rabbi of Magen David Kehila before branching off a decade later and opening the first unaffiliated shul and kollel in the country. Very interesting enough. So Rabbi Zarikin also achieved greatness with regards to kollel business over there, and so much great achievements have been achieved, let's just say, with this making into a Makom Torah, place of Torah, with great derech eretz, respect, and Torah has actually surfaced in the Mexican Jewish community also in itself. I think I'm just adapting this from this was also Rabbi Shweki was being introduced, and I think it was a Mishpacha article from the 872nd issue, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure how many years ago this actually comes from, but it does come from a while ago. Now, friends, over here we're doing a live video over here about the Mexican Jewish community. Please, everyone, subscribe to the channel over here. We are nearing at the moment 8,000 subscribers as we explore the different Jewish communities all across the world in this special edition over here, where we happen to be speaking about Mexico Jewish community. Now, we've already spoken about a staggering 30 countries worldwide already here inside this series. Very, very interesting enough. Now, friends, we are a community here. We're learning about different countries all over the world, Jewish communities that have been blossoming about. We've already recorded about 30 countries at the moment. We actually spoke about Cyprus last night, if you recollect. I recommend everyone to watch it. And we actually did a 4-part series speaking about the Jewish community history, also of Mexico, also quite recently. So that's something else that we have to point out over here inside the series as we are traveling all over various different places and really, really enriching ourselves in Jewish wisdom and Judaism itself, respectively. So, so please, everyone, join our channel, subscribe to the channel, and join. We also don't just record videos here of great rabbis of yesteryear. Also, another project that we're working on at the moment on this channel is we do biography videos of great rabbis of yesteryear. We've already recorded about nearly 1,400 rabbis of previous days. So please look over the Stories of Tzaddikim section inside the channel, and you can watch those videos also. Also, we have every single day we try and get a great Jewish personality, a rabbi or a scholar, to share over bursts of wisdom, Jewish wisdom, to empower our days and boost ourselves, where they speak for a minute or two and give over we've had some of the top rabbis, Jewish personalities. We've even had Knesset members also speak inside this channel. So please subscribe to our channel. We've got fantastic content here. We also record short clips of, let's just say, important archaeologies all over Eretz Israel. We try and explore this beautiful country and the different archaeologies, the different sites over here, and the sounds of Israel. That's another project that we are working on at the moment, which we also have to point out, friends, over here. And other projects that we're working on at the moment. We do videos on Parshat Shavuot, the weekly Torah portion we record about, also on the Hebrew month. And we also speak about current events also. We also did a lot of biography videos where we did speak about, let's say, there's various different yeshivot in different countries and the different synagogues in different countries, and we are just branching it out here at the moment. Now, today we did speak about Mexico here on the special edition. I have to point out to you, I did mention about many of the more recent rabbis, but there were many other rabbis from many of the other communities, but I didn't get the chance to, because I wanted to do this in a let's just say one class session. I couldn't really, we're coming close to 2 hours of this video, so I couldn't really justify and speak any more than we could have potentially done about, but there was so much more information we could have given over within regards to great rabbis from Mexico of yesteryear. So that's very important to do. Now, one thing you didn't notice about a lot of my videos, friends, I'm very spontaneous. I like to record in different places. I don't have my own office per se, let's just say, in of itself. So I like to go to different places. So if you like to see action in Israel and different sights and scenes, please subscribe to our channel, and you're going to see so much different scenes and sites and archaeologies of Israel. Now, friends, if you look on our section on the channel, we've got an entire tours of Israel section where we tour all over, especially Jerusalem. We've done about 125 tours around Jerusalem. We've done a lot of tours also in the city of Bet Shemesh in Israel, we have to point out. Also where we explore, let's just say, and different areas all over these places. We try and explore the different synagogues, the heritage places, and the famous places here in Israel also. Another project that we work on also on this channel is we visit different American English-speaking yeshivot also here in Israel, and you know, we try and explore. At the same time, that's where we record the videos with various different prominent rabbis here of current day. So that's another exciting project that we have to mention about over here, and you know, so much more. So we're very excited. We also do on the channel a Daf Yomi tidbit on Talmud every single day, where we speak a few minutes about the daily page of wisdom from the Talmud, from the Gemara. And currently I believe we've been recorded about 1,200 videos on the daily Talmud. We actually started off on the tractate of Masechet Ketubot. I think if we go back till it was, I think, back in June, I think 2022, if I'm not mistaken, that was the first time period where we actually started recording these tidbits on the Talmud over here, and going from strength to strength. At the moment we're in Masechet Zvachim over here. So if anyone enjoys Talmud, that's another fantastic reason, let's just say, to join our community and join our channel. It's always a privilege. Friends over here, I want to wish you all a fantastic day. Thank you for tuning in. It was a excellent. We spoke about Mexico, the community. We spoke about some of the chief rabbis. We spoke about some of the synagogues, the personalities, the kollel industry and the Torah industry. Let's just say itself really grew in Mexico. The different events that occurred. It was really an entire broad video of Mexico in of itself. So I think it was definitely an opportune time to speak about it, and very important time to speak about it also. So pleasure. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and Bezrat Hashem, watch the space for more great content that we're going to have, and as we speak about more about the life of great rabbis and the life of the different countries all over the diaspora and the Jewish world. So thank you for watching, and wishing you all a fantastic day. And once again, please everyone, don't forget, please subscribe to the channel and join, as we are coming close to 8,000 subscribers, which is a phenomenal achievement. So please everyone, if you can join the channel and subscribe, I really will appreciate it. And you're going to see so much great Jewish wisdom content over here come from the channel. So thank you, and have